welcome to episode 5 of On the Bench. If you build aircraft, ships, tanks, science fiction subjects, dioramas, or space, this is a podcast for you. In this episode, we'll be talking to the Assistant Manager of the Australian Armour and Artillery Museum up in Cairns, Queensland. And we'll be having a talk about model cars, and Julian is back to talk about some myth busting. We'll have our usual What's New segment, and this episode we're going to be having some listener mail. And what's new? Well, HPH models have released a 1/32nd scale F7F-3P Tiger Cat, which is certainly garnering a lot of interest online at the moment, and that looks like it's going to make a fantastic kit. Hobby Boss this month have announced the release of a new Focke-Wulf FW190A5 model. Now, the kicker about this one is it's actually in 1/18th scale, which is going to be absolutely huge. And you're a fan of the Butcherbirds. Is this something you want to be buying?
Oh, I love the Workers, but at the moment I wouldn't have anywhere to even put the box. I'd hate to even think how large the carton that'd come in.
I don't think I could even put it on my bench. It'd be that big.
Yeah, you definitely have to make yourself up a quite large spray booth, I think.
Oh, sure. Also from Hobby Boss, there is a LKW 5-ton truck in 1/35th scale. And from Hobby Boss is the Sedilts, the SMS Sedilts, which is a 1/350 scale battleship that was about 24,000 tons, and that was commissioned back in May 1913. We have a Russian KRAZ 2060B tractor in 1/35th scale. That also comes with a couple of the nuclear-capable rocket launchers on the back, and it looks like it's going to make quite a nice kit also. So that's it from Hobby Boss. From Revell this month, they've announced the release of a 1/350 scale Tiger, as if there aren't enough Tigers out in the market already. It's a nice looking kit. I don't know whether the market needs another Tiger. I guess those sort of things sell well, so that's why they're punching it out.
It's like Messerschmitts and P-51s.
Oh, and Spitfires as well. A Fletcher class destroyer in 1/148th scale, which makes a length of 797 millimetres. So that's going to be quite a long kit also. Comes with lots of photo etch as well as brass barrels as well. So that should make up quite a nice kit actually, looking at it.
You know, do a really large diorama with the 1/48 scale U-boat.
Yes, it would. They're also producing a 1/72nd scale Airbus A400M Atlas, which is serving with the German Luftwaffe and also the RAF, I believe, as well.
Yep.
That's it from Revell. Kitty Hawk have already produced an SU-35, but they've just announced that they're re-releasing it in PLAAF colours, so Chinese Air Force, and also quite a few little other bits and pieces in that kit as well, just to make that up. So that looks like it's going to make a nice little kit as well.
Well, as long as it's better than their SU-22.
Yeah, that's true. Of course, all the usual features are going to be included, including detailed cockpit, wheelbase, are going to be able to display it either open with the gear down, and also there's a lot of payload of air-to-air and air-to-ground missiles, bombs and rockets, and a number of different pods that will come with it.
And lots of over-engineering.
So for those of you who like to display it all fully bombed up, that'll be available for you. And the last one we've got for you today is from Stalingrad Miniatures. They've released some very interesting figures. There's an old lady with 3 chooks. Looks like she's from Russia. There's a couple of soldiers on skis. A figurine of a lady in a very provocative pose wearing a bikini. And a very strange short man with an AK-47. So for those of you who like building figures, this should hopefully provide something interesting for you. And that's it for What's News. Again, if you've got something you'd like us to actually review or have a look at it, drop us an email at onthebench64@gmail.com. Coming up next, we're going to be having a chat with Jason from the Australian Armour and Artillery Museum in Queensland. And we're back and we're talking with Jason, who's the Assistant Manager from the Australian Armour Artillery Museum, which is based up in Cairns in North Queensland. Hello, Jason. How are you?
Yeah, good, and yourself?
Not too bad. Welcome to On the Bench.
Well, thank you.
So you must have what a lot of us would think would be a dream job, working in a museum that has over 140 armed vehicles and artillery pieces. How did you land a role like this?
Well, it was by accident, actually. I'd left the Defence Force, the Army, in 2014, and I moved to Cairns, and I was just driving by the site where the museum currently is, and it says find us on Facebook. So I looked up the web page itself, had a look at it, and then I explained, I sent the owner a message and said, listen, this is who I am, this is my background. Have you got anything that I can give you a hand with? So he sent me a message back saying basically come in on a Saturday. We'll have a chat. We'll see what services you can provide. And at that stage, what he was doing was just a bit of restoration on some of the bits and pieces that he had here already. So one of them was the German 88 flak gun. So every Saturday from that day, I came in and I assisted the owner with just some basic restoration work on some of the exhibits. And then as the museum progressed in building, by that stage I had already had when I moved to Cairns, I'd had another job, but he had offered me the assistant manager's job, and I basically said, did you even have to ask? He should have just said, turn up on Monday and start. Basically, because I had an armoured background.
Yep.
But coming into this job was just a dream come true, and I basically get to drive. We generally have about 51% of the vehicles running at the moment, and I get to drive all of them.
Wow, that's amazing. So the museum, it's the largest privately owned collection of its kind in the Southern Hemisphere.
Yeah, that's right. Because it's just one private owner, Rob, the owner, has basically in about 8 years of collecting, we're up to, as you said, 140 exhibits at the moment, and we've got another 35 due to come in over the next 12 to 18 months. And to house those exhibits, we're also extending our buildings at the moment. So essentially in about 18 months, we're going to double our footprint, basically to fit all these exhibits in.
And it's not just all static too. A lot of these vehicles are actually running vehicles, aren't they?
Yeah, that's correct. So we've got actually 74 vehicles on the floor, and pretty much 51% of them, or just over half of them, still run and we can drive around. And, considering we've got, vehicles from, pick a country, basically Russia, America, England, Australia, all over the place, and each vehicle has its own unique way of starting up, its own way of driving. So to get your head around, trying to get into the vehicle, start it up and drive it can be interesting.
Yeah, I can imagine. So especially with some of these stuff from, say, World War II, and I'm thinking in particular the German stuff you've got, or even some of the Allied vehicles you've got, spare parts aren't something you just get off the local shelf, is it? So how do you go about maintaining and keeping them running?
Well, we have a mechanic who's, he's old school mechanic. He's sort of semi-retired. He comes in and every Monday or Wednesday, and he'll just tinker with a lot of this stuff because it's simplistic in its design, basically. Carbies and all that sort of stuff. He loves that stuff. He has a very well, put through thought process of how vehicles work, he can pretty much get most of the stuff running. And if we need parts, then sometimes, we have to go down the mainstream way of getting current parts to fit in and do the job.
Yeah. The German collection, just tell some of our listeners about some of the German tanks that you've got there.
Well, at the moment we've got the Tiger replica, which was the actual vehicle that was out of the movie Fury. So it was the static exhibit on the actual film. So what we did was we bought that vehicle, shipped it over to Australia. We've now made it into a running Tiger replica.
Okay.
So essentially, it's true in size. It's a full size replica, but to get it running, we had to put obviously limited to what we had here. So we put running gear from a T55 on it. So your torsion bars and your support arms. Road wheels off an M110 American self-propelled gun because they're virtually the same size as the Tiger.
Yep.
The sprockets we had made up so they look like a Tiger sprocket. However, we had to use a transmission from a T62. So the actual sprockets, unfortunately, they sit about 200 mil higher than what they should. And the track, obviously, we couldn't get original Tiger track, so we used track off T55. Which, in the scheme of things, if you look at when they moved Tigers around on the railways back in World War II,
yep,
they put transit tracks on, which are a lot narrower, so they could fit them on the cars. So those tracks are about the same size as a transit track on a Tiger. We also mounted a truck engine in it from a Scania, so it's a V8 Scania truck engine. So we can drive this vehicle high and low range gears. We can started off in any gear because the power to weight ratio is actually quite good. And recently I did a lap or two on Oz Armour Fest in the Tiger replica.
And your Oz Armour Fest, that's where you have the whole place opened up on the weekend and a lot of vehicles running for people to come and ride on. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. So it's generally on the Father's Day weekend, which sort of is close to our birthday, which is the 6th of September. And this year we had 15 vehicles basically ready to go and drive outside. And it was a massive weekend for us. We sold over 600 ride tokens for the whole weekend, which was a massive leap from last year. But otherwise, in the way of German stuff, we've got a little Panzer 38T, which is still in running condition.
Well, still in running condition even now. Wow, that's terrific.
Tank destroyer, which is only one of 2 working original Hetzers in the world.
Yep.
We've got the 251 half track. We've got a 250 half track. We've got a Stug replica at the moment, but we will be at later stage have Stug 3, Stug 4 on the floor. And the plan is eventually to have Panzer 1 through to 6 on the floor, because we've also got a Panther OSF A arriving late next year, which will be in running condition as well.
Oh, that's exciting news. It
is. I just can't wait for that one. It's going to be massive, especially for the weekend, because that's our logo, is the Panther.
Yep.
We've also, by the time the boss finishes, we will have the largest collection of 251 half tracks in the world. So we're going to have at least 7 different variants of the half track. So in essence, we're going to have roughly 19 German vehicles on the floor, plus all your artillery side of the house as well.
And you were talking earlier on about having to increase the footprint. I noticed that you're building the Wehrmacht Hall to house all the German...
Yeah, that's our first extension that we got going up this year. So it'll be finished probably late October, early November. And basically everything that we have German-wise will go in that hall. And then as the museum progresses with its next extension, the museum will have more of a logistical method of where it puts its vehicles. So it will be by country. Whether we put it by era, by type, that'll sort of come out a bit later on. But we will have a more set out structure of the museum where all the vehicles, will be together for that country sort of thing.
Okay. Across to your Russian collection there, you got about 5 Russian tanks there?
Yeah, we've got the T-72, we've got the T-55, we've got SU-100, T-34, we've got the Pion self-propelled gun, we've got the little SU-76 self-propelled gun as well. We've got T-60, T-70, which is early World War II Russian. We've got quite a few Russian pieces. And then we've got also recently in a BMP-1, which is working. We've got the 2S1 self-propelled gun. That's working as well. We used both of those vehicles on Oz Armour Fest as well. The Russian collection's looking quite good.
And tanks from the United States?
Yeah, so we've got a few of them. So we've got the M47 on the floor at the moment. We've got the Sherman M4A1. We've got, obviously, Grant, Lee's. We've got a Australian modified Uramba, which is off the Lee chassis. So we've got quite a few armoured cars as well from America.
Yep.
So, we've still got... the boss has got, I think, an M41 undergoing restoration in Melbourne at the moment. We'll have an M48, M60 due to come in at a later stage as well.
The British collection counts, you got a Centurion. You've got a Chieftain, which I was surprised. I don't know how you got your hands on one of them.
Yeah, so we've got the Chieftain Mark 10. So that's in running condition as well. However, it's got a bit of a coolant leak, and unfortunately the accelerator sticks a little bit. So the boss just try to drive that too often because obviously in a confined space, a bit of a sticky accelerator can lead to an accident that we don't really want to have. We've got the Chieftain, we've got the Centurion, we've got a couple of the versions of the Matilda. We've got an Archer self-propelled gun as well, Valentine, and a few other British armoured cars. So the Humber armoured car as well, which is in running condition. We're plodding along. We've got, what else? We've got the Ferret, the Saladin, the Saracen, the Fox, the Sabre, the 432, 434. We've got quite a few British vehicles on the floor as well.
The Brits certainly liked their armoured cars, didn't they?
Well, they certainly did. Considering the Humber armoured cars, they built, I think, 5,400 of them during World War II. And they were, essentially an armoured car that did quite well for itself, especially in the North African campaign, in a reconnaissance role all through Europe. But unfortunately, you don't hear about this vehicle a lot, considering they built so many of them.
Exactly. Tanks from Australia. So you got the Sentinel, Matilda.
So we've got 2 versions of the Sentinel. So we got the AC1, which had the 2-pounder gun fitted.
Yep.
Then we got the AC4, which was the prototype with the 17-pounder fitted on it. So we've got both those vehicles side by side. Now, considering there was about 65 of these vehicles built, there's only 6 remaining left in the world. So we have 2 of them. And the 2 that we have together actually have a bit of history between each other.
Okay.
Because after the war, obviously, a lot of the vehicles were sold off, etc. Now, a tank collector down in Melbourne, he bought quite a few of them. Now, obviously, they chop and change turrets, move things around to fix other vehicles. Now, the 2 that we have, the serial numbers that are on these vehicles, the turret off the AC1 actually belongs on the hull of the AC4.
Oh.
So we've got those 2 that have actually got some history together, considered, out of the 65.
Oh, that's amazing. That's absolutely... And Australian Army history is so short, although having said that, I mean, we did plunder the battlefields of World War I and managed to bring a couple of back with us. But, Australian Army history is so short and far between because a lot of this, as you said, a lot of the stuff was sold off. Matildas after the war were sold off to farmers to help them, open up the fields and everything. And
Yeah, exactly. Most of them would buy at least 2 Matildas, take the turrets off them, and put big chains in between them and just strip the land.
Yep.
Because, they had the torque, basically, in the engine to do that. And unfortunately, after a while, a lot of the hulls, the engines, if they give way, the hulls were just left basically on properties to rust away. Now we've got, I think we've got our front desk is the hull of a Matilda.
Oh, okay.
People come in and they see the side of it, and they give it a bit of a tap, thinking it's wood, and it's not until they actually go around the side that they can go, hang on, this is an actual hull of a tank. So we've got that one. We've got another Matilda, which was part of the 2nd 9th Armoured Division. That went over to Tarakan, so we know it's got history.
Yep.
We've also got a Matilda Dozer, and we've also got across the road in the storage shed, we've got another 2 Matildas as well that eventually the boss will go up and he'll use as trade vehicles.
Right.
We originally had another Matilda sitting in the museum, and the Russians that the boss deals with quite a lot heard that we had this Matilda. They put up a plan, said, hang on, can we swap a vehicle to get a Matilda? So the boss has gone, okay, what have you got? So they come back and said, we've actually almost finished doing up a Russian Su-76 to working condition. So the boss has gone, well, great, this sounds really good. I'd like one of those. So the deal went through. So we swapped them basically a static Matilda, and we gave them a couple of engines, and we got a working Russian Su-76 out of it.
Sounds like a good deal.
That's what I reckon as well. And, I get to drive this vehicle as well. It's not the fastest of vehicles, but talk about turning on a dime, because we had to move it in the museum around yesterday. This thing can, do a 90-degree turn in not much room at all.
Wow.
So it's actually very manoeuvrable for what it is.
So, Jason, you'd be better placed, because we always have these arguments, this tank versus that tank would have been better. You having access and being able to drive a lot of these ones, which one is your favourite, and which one would you least want to go to war in, and which one would you most want to go to war in?
Okay, so basically I'm an ex-Leopard crewman. I commanded Leopard for a couple of years as well. So we have a Leopard 1A5 here, which is a Belgian operated Leopard. Now, they are the easiest vehicle to drive. They're basically a 4-speed automatic. These things can turn, they can do a pivot on its own spot. They're so lovely to drive, and they're very fast. But obviously, considering their age, they're getting on metal fatigue. So, going to war in any of these vehicles now, considering their age, especially armour-wise, probably not that flash, but we still have quite a few fast vehicles in here. So I'd probably go with Leopard. The T-72 that we have here is in running condition. However, you look at the way Russians built their equipment, they built it en masse. They didn't really care too much about any safety mechanisms within the vehicle as well.
Or creature comfort, for that matter.
Yeah, exactly. And, to sit in the T-72, the driver has a fair amount of room, but if you were any taller than 5'7", you basically could not fit in the turret of a T-72 by the time you closed the hatch on top of you. Otherwise, you'd be having a crook neck for a while. So basically, I'd choose, a Western tank, obviously, over anything Russian.
Yep.
But Russian vehicles are so easy to drive. Most of them are manuals, but the T-72 is so easy to drive. The clutch is really nice. It's a 7-speed manual. If you drive the Russian 2S1, the self-propelled gun, it's a 5-speed manual, but you can just release the clutch and she'll just slowly drive off. But if you get into the BMP-1, well, that's just driving a sports car off the line doing 0 to 400 metres in about 2 minutes.
Wow.
It's very fast off the line, but then again it's a manual, 5-speed manual, so you've got to move your way through the gears, and especially on the BMP, the gear pattern isn't really that well planned out.
Yeah, yeah.
But again, it's still, the Russian vehicles are so nice to drive.
So with the ride days, are people able to actually just prop themselves inside the vehicles that you have on the ride days and just go for a belt round the track?
Yeah, so every day at 11 o'clock and 2 o'clock, we do offer joyrides, and this is on a modified British 432. So it is open back, because we've cut a lot of the armour out. We've put bench seats in there, so it seats 10. So we do that every day, obviously depending on numbers and whether it's raining or not. And like even yesterday, we had 3 full rides, so at least 30 people first thing up at 11 o'clock. So it's one of those days that's a hit and miss. Some days we won't have any. Next day we might have, like we did yesterday, 30 people. And then obviously on Armour Fest, we sell tokens, ride tokens to go on vehicles, because a lot of people around Australia wouldn't necessarily get the chance to ride in an armoured vehicle, anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Unless you'd been
So
in the green machine for a while.
Yeah, so we offer that experience for people. And as we've found, this is our 3rd year that we ran sort of an Armour Fest. We have people came back, for the last 3 years wanting to do more rides. A couple of the regulars that we had in, they come in and they spoke to me before and said, listen, I've got $1,000 for rides. The other guy had $600 for rides. So these are genuine, tank enthusiasts.
Yep.
They want to come in and ride and feel these vehicles.
Yep. And this would be the only place in Australia that you could do this now?
Well, not necessarily. We're probably the largest quantity of rides. There's another tank ride place in southeast Queensland. He does Centurion and Sabre. Then you got Gippsland down in Victoria. There's another company down there now that are starting to offer, rides as well. He's got Centurion, he's got a couple of M113s, 432s, Saracens, Ferrets, that sort of stuff. So, yes, he's not as big as us, but, these people are now starting to get, this sort of thing happening.
And it's certainly cheaper to jump in an old tank than it is to jump in an old aircraft and go for a joy flight, that's for sure.
Oh, exactly. So every day when we do our ride vehicles, so, the adults are $15, children are $10 for a ride. And I don't think I've ever had, a bad review of anybody coming off a ride. At the moment, it's a little bit dusty out there, and I pre-warn people that, hey, dust will come in. But they still continue to go on the ride. So, some of these people come out, especially if you're at the back end of the vehicle, come out, in a nice shade of dust. But, yeah, by all accounts, I don't think I've ever had anybody say I didn't like it.
You mentioned dust, and that sort of leads me to the next question about environment. I mean, if you're going to open the tank museum, I think Cairns would be one of the last places that I chose to actually have something that's made of a lot of metal, because with all the humidity up there, and you're not that far away from the beach line either. So it must be a lot of work for you guys to keep these vehicles well maintained. Yeah,
well, everything is undercover. We have very large ceiling fans that keep the air moving. So even if it does get humid, at least it's keeping the air moving. And we have a number of volunteers that come in during the week. In their own time, they can stay here for as long as they want, and they'll just potter around and just generally try and keep the vehicles clean, because obviously we do get a little bit of dust that comes in. But yeah, they keep the vehicles sort of, in a nice, clean environment. And we've almost caught up at the moment to washing down the vehicles from Armour Fest. Because, we're out of all those vehicles that we took out, trying to get them clean and do your other tasks within the museum. So, we're probably taking a better part of 3 weeks to try and get them all clean.
Well, you mentioned that you have volunteers coming in during the week. I think you've let the cat out of the bag there, so every armour enthusiast in Australia is probably going to retire to Cairns now so they can spend their retirement working at the museum.
Yeah, exactly. We get quite a few, even people, wanting to drop in their resumes, that sort of thing. They're looking for jobs, and they want to come into this environment. at this stage, the boss is happy with the staffing levels, but once we go bigger, virtually when we double in size, footprint-wise, we may look at, bringing in another person. But what we find is, sort of that very niche market in tourism where if somebody applies, to come in and want to work here, you've got to know about these type of, equipment that we have on the floor.
Yep.
It's all one thing just to be able to work on the front counter, but we get a lot of questions from, people who come in saying, what's this and what's this and what does this do? And if you don't have that knowledge, it sort of, puts the museum down a little bit. So,
exactly right. You've got to know the difference between a Japanese 75mm Type 31 and a 70mm Type 92 light howitzer.
Yeah. So you need to look at somebody who has a very keen interest in this and is willing to, learn, because I am always learning. There's little things about vehicles that you just go and find and you've got to study up on, because every Wednesday I run what's known as an open hatch day. So what I'll do is I'll pick a vehicle, generally in advance we put it on the website, and then at 11:30 on that Wednesday I'll give a spiel about that vehicle, and I'll go into why it come about, go into its key characteristics, your firepower, your armour protection, and your mobility.
Yep.
So you've got to have all this information generally sitting in the back of your head, ready to go. And then, we have a lot of questions come out. And then after the talk, I actually allow people to get inside and take, photos, especially if there is an interior. And this is something that we generally don't allow people to do, any other day.
Okay.
You imagine the volume of people that come in wanting to get in every vehicle, things will eventually get damaged, like, all your seating and that sort of stuff. So Wednesday is that perfect opportunity for people to come in, listen to some information about the vehicles that we have on hand, and then, either we start the vehicle up as well for them if it is a runner, and then, we'll let them get inside and have a look.
That sounds like a fantastic idea. I've been to Bovington before, which I thought was a fantastic place, and to see the vision to do something like this down in the Southern Hemisphere, I've just got to take my hat off. I think that's fantastic. Now, what I noticed in Bovington when I was there is actually a model show on, and of course this podcast is mainly for people who build models, so this will be a very interesting segment for them to listen to. Ever thought about holding a model competition there on the same day or at the Tank Museum?
We haven't really gone down that path just yet. We did sort of spitball it quite a while ago about even having, workshops in here as well, because we do have a large mezzanine floor. And there was sort of, we were going through, do we hold workshops here where, modelers can come in, they can, build models upstairs, they can, give all their, little tricks of the trade sort of thing to other modelers that want to learn how to do it. Because the North Queensland, the guys down in Townsville, they have, their model competition.
Yep.
Basically every year. They hold it down at Jazeen Barracks down there. We do have a modelling club up here, but it's not a large club per se. But yeah, we could be quite open to, holding that sort of event. We do have the space.
It just seemed very successful at Bovington when I was over there. That was all, and I thought it was a good way of, cross-pollinating. You look at how the interest in, I'm just trying to think of that computer game that all the kids are playing now with tanks, World of Tanks.
Yep.
And, that company that actually produced that game is actually pumping money back into restoring old vehicles now. And
yeah, well, one of the Sentinels that we do have here on the floor is actually owned by the World of Tanks Corporation.
Oh, there you go.
And we deal with World of Tanks quite often. They were here at Oz Armour Fest with their virtual reality goggles as well, the same as what they just had over in Bovington for their Tank Fest. So we had that same technology here for people to look at. We've had Richard Cutland and Nicholas Moran here also doing filming on our vehicles, so you can actually see them on YouTube as well. So we do have that interaction with World of Tanks now. And, you know, they are starting to put their name on a few models, a few model kits now as well.
Yeah, we're seeing that.
Which
yes.
we do stock some of them as well.
Okay, so if I go through your museum, have a look, and it really fires my creative juices, as I walk out, you've got a little section there for me to purchase some kits as well?
Yeah, so we've got a whole wall attributed to models. You know, we sell the Tamiya paints as well. We sell all the tool kits, the brushes, virtually anything that you want to do with, you know, the modelling side of the house. We've got, and if we haven't got it, we can definitely get it in for the customer as well. But we've probably got, what have we got? Looking at the shelf, we've got four shelves basically, you know, running the full length of the wall, full of models, both in 1 in 72 and 1 in 35 scale.
Oh, Jason, music to my ears. Sounds like you got it all locked down up there.
We certainly do. We're the only business in Cairns that does sell models now. Toy World closed down a few years ago here, so we pretty much captured the whole market on the modelling scene.
Oh, fantastic. Jason, it's been fantastic talking to you. Thanks for taking the time. I'm sure that our listeners are going to be getting some feedback on this, and no doubt they'll ask me to ring you up again in the future when you got those other tanks in. We can talk in more detail perhaps about the Panther that you got coming.
Not a problem.
All right, thank you very much, Jason, and thank you for your time.
No worries. Have a good day.
Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.
So we're back. It was a great interview listening to Jason and everything that he had to say up there. I've got to get up there. We have to get up there and do a show from the museum. What do you reckon, guys?
I think that's a plan, Dave.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, I think we might aim it for the next time they do one of their Ozfest days. So, Ian, what have you got for us today?
Me? I actually bought a model with me today. I've got the Guns Sanyo 124 scale Cobra Daytona Coupe. Not the easiest kit to find these days. I think it came out in the 90s. It's a curbside, so you don't get a motor, but it's chockers full of white metal, photo etch. It's the body you don't need to do anything to by the looks of it. It's just so clean. And the Cobra Daytona Coupe's always been a bit of a favourite of mine. I love me Shelbys and Mopars, and I'm a happy boy. It's a stunning looking little kit. It's the chassis you got to build up yourself out of. They supply you with all the white metal, and it looks like brass tubing for the chassis. It's got the nicest chrome I've seen on a model kit for a long while. The only really weird thing I found about it is the interior is like made out of the same material as the tyres. So I'm not sure how that's going to go with paint.
So you're getting on a bit of a car kick at the moment.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. I just pulled out of the collection the old monogram, what is it, the 1970 Plymouth Superbird, which I've done a little bit of modifications, opened up the vents and just finished giving it a nice coat of corporate blue, which is pretty close to the, which is actually the Richard Petty blue of the era. It's not a bad kit. It's showing its age. The interior of that thing's basically just a one-piece tub. So when it comes to painting your chrome trims around your doors and that, it's a bit of a challenge. It's not bad. I came about a bit of a surprise. I didn't actually look at it till I was three-quarters of the way through building the thing when I realised that since it's that old, it's been sitting in the collection for close to 30 years, that I only had one tyre left.
What happened to the other tyres?
I have no idea, Dave. They seem to have just vanished. I've probably put them aside somewhere about 25 years ago and just forgotten about them, and they've gone.
So you're not going to go down the. You're going to be fairly conservative with the paint. You're not going to go and get some. Go down to the local cosmetic store and get a whole heap of fingernail polish and use that.
No, I'm not into that. When it comes to cars, I like having the factory colour scheme. So, in the ones I recently, was it this week, got a nice carton from I think it's Model Speedway in Melbourne, in Preston. They're closing down at the end of the year, unfortunately. And he's got 30% off all his car kits.
Well, that sounds like a deal.
It was, yeah. I ended up getting a 68 and a 1970, was it Plymouth Roadrunners, a 69 Dodge Daytona Charger, and the fourth one was I'm trying to think what the fourth kit was.
Oh, it sounds like you've really drunk the Kool-Aid and you're going right down the rabbit hole.
Went there and found a whole heap of paint chips, so looks like I might be having to go down to the automotive paint suppliers and see if they can make me up some small batches of the right colours.
So is this something you got on the bench now, or is it something...
Yeah, the Superbird's on the bench at the moment. This afternoon I'll stick the decals on it. Unfortunately, because of the restraints with copyright, Monogram doesn't supply you with the Roadrunner badges for the wings and for the one at the front of the nose. But there is a guy in the States who makes aftermarket ones, so I've ordered some of them on eBay.
Yep.
Hopefully they'll come in the next few weeks and pop it together. I bought another... That's right, that's the other kit I bought, was another Superbird, just so I could get the tyres off it. And then lo and behold, that night after I ordered that, I got on eBay and found out some guy in the States was selling us full set of wheels and rims for that kit, and I've gone, oh well.
Money down.
Money down, buy them. So I'll have two Superbirds.
We were talking before offline about some of the kits that you can get from Monogram, the metal ones, Julian, weren't we?
That wasn't Monogram. That was
not Monogram.
Model Factory Hero.
Factory Hero.
Yeah. Paying big money there, Dave.
Yeah, paying huge. How much were you saying, Julian?
Oh, some of them go up to like $1,300.
$1,300 for a kit.
Yeah. I mean, they're all classified as multimedia kits. It's all white metal, resin, not much in the way of plastic. I don't think they got any plastic in them, do they?
If any. And to think they're only
Maybe
143 scale, so they're quite small.
Wow.
If you're going to be forking out that amount of money, I know that B&A has got a 1/12 scale, I think, Shelby Cobra for just under $1,000.
No, I can see a bit of a twinkle in your eyes to say that.
Yeah, I know. It's tempting. It actually comes with 3 different versions, 2 race and 1 street.
Yeah. Have you guys had much experience actually painting on die-cast?
No.
Die-cast. Yeah, die-cast. I just recently finished the old Revell 56 Chev 2-door for a customer, and it was a crappy kit. I really hated building it. He wanted it painted in the same colour as his 4-door, so it's a metallic purple and silver. And just as a surprise, he stuck I think it would be about 143 scale metal-bodied toy car in there for me to repaint. So, took it down to bare metal, scratched up the surface, put some nice couple of coats of etch primer on it.
So Ian's actually just said that he did etch primer on something.
When it comes to metal. So I etch primed it. Like, before I etch primed it, I gave it a good clean with some Prepsol, and just to make sure everything would stick, put the etch primer on, put the undercoat gave it a sand, put the undercoat over that. Sorry, I didn't give it a sand because you don't sand etch primer. You put an undercoat straight over the top, sanded the undercoat, put the colour on. Then I got it all painted up. Then I masked it up to do the chrome trims and took the masks off and took a big swathe of paint off the bottom. Right hand rear quarter. It's like, back on the top of the shelf.
All right, so coming up next, Julian's going to be doing some myth busting, and hopefully before the end of the show we can cure Ian of his craze for cars. So coming up soon, we've got Julian. And we're back, and Julian's going to be talking about some myth busting. What do you got for us today, Julian?
Well, I have an interest in sort of the dispelling myths and misconceptions, and this is just some sort of interest of mine that sort of cropped up over the last year or two. And there are a few sort of places I've been finding some things out done by much better people than me, obviously. For example, things like nicknames. We often hear that planes like the Corsair and the Beaufighter have nicknamed Whistling Death or Whispering Death, but those are definitely myths. Most likely propaganda created to sort of make it a bit more appealing to the war effort, all that sort of thing. But if you actually go into, like, say, the Japanese logbooks and all the rest, they make no reference to either of those names.
So Whistling Death or Whispering Death, nothing whatsoever.
Nope.
Yeah.
So with the Corsair, there's no mention of that at all. It's the same thing goes for the Beaufighter. The Beaufighter, I've read some fact type stuff where some people seem to think that it originated from mess hall with the RAF, and they started that sort of thing going, and it gets passed around, mentioned in modelers talk, as you often hear it, and much like the Ronson myth with Shermans, how that was also a myth, and that was a post-war myth. There's actually quite a few sort of post-war type things that get passed around, and you have to remember that a lot of pilots have quite a bit of ego, and they like to sort of flare up their stories sometimes.
Yeah, sure. So what other myths have you got there to bust for us today?
Well, there's also been some talk about Michael Whitman, the famous Tiger ace, and he always claimed that, he claimed in his reports that he was in his famous thing where he drove into Villa Bocage and shot up all the British tanks when all the British exited their vehicles to talk tactics and have tea. He went and solo killed a whole bunch of tanks, but and he was taken out by a 6-pounder anti-tank gun. It turns out that wasn't the case. He was actually taken out by a Sherman Firefly.
Oh, well, there you go. So again, you get these myths that sort of appear because people write their own history, or people have got an axe to grind, or they've got a certain wheelbarrow to push, so they'll sort of build something up which wasn't factual at all.
Yeah, there's a lot of myths and misconceptions, like also with regards to Shermans. Also, the rates at which they would catch fire was no different than any other tank, and even went down once they introduced the water storage for the ammunition.
Yep.
And the thing is, like, often I should cite my sources.
Yep, go ahead.
If you go on YouTube and look up a channel called The Chieftain's Hatch, there's a gentleman there. I believe his name was something Moran. I forgot his name. And anyway, so he if you go onto his channel, he has a lot of great videos about armor, and he actually does one such video is a talk he did at the Flying Heritage Collection in Seattle, and it was just a talk about myths and misconceptions about American armor. And he talks a lot about Shermans and the rate they catch fire, and the myths of tank busters, and how tank busters were good at taking out lots of things that were not tanks.
So we're talking about here is things like the Typhoons and the Tempests.
Yes.
And the P-47s with rocket launchers under the wings.
Yep. And so one such example that he gave was that the British actually conducted a test where they flew some 70-something passes at a solo captured Panther, not moving, in a field, painted white. And near near misses did 0 damage to the tank. Only direct hits did damage, and something like less than 1% of those rockets actually hit the target.
But you could see where it'd come from with over-reporting of the pilots when they're, on their attack run. From their point of view, they're moving at, 400 miles an hour or whatever across the ground.
It's no easy task.
No.
And you have to remember, like, a lot of these pilots, they didn't have a whole lot of experience and a lot of time before they were actually thrown into combat.
Yeah, and you got to think also that the gun sights were fairly crude then as well.
Yep. There's also. I mean, you do have to sort of go and say, well, that test was done with one tank, and most likely they'd be in a column.
Yep.
And a column's far easier to hit than a single vehicle. But at the same time, wouldn't you rather put those rockets to work on a train or a building or a runway or there's so many other things you can hit where it's going to be much more devastating than taking out tanks.
Yeah, but from a pilot point of view, I mean, if you're sort of, flying across the French countryside or indeed even the German countryside and you see a sort of tank or a half-track pop up, you're certainly going to have a crack at it, aren't you?
Yes. Well, I mean, assuming you don't actually have a goal a mission in mind where you're set to take out a specific target. I know in like the later days of the war, often I believe Spitfires were given the role of flying over Northern Europe, like the Netherlands, Norway, Finland, somewhere around there, and their orders were to shoot anything that moved because anything that moved was for the war effort.
Absolutely. So, any other myths for us?
Yeah, sure. There's also another great place where I like to find things is there's a YouTube channel called Forgotten Weapons, and Ian McCullum over there, he specializes in videos specifically about firearms. He does a lot of work on World War I, World War II sort of era firearms, and some of these rifles and light machine guns often earned a very bad reputation, and a lot of the time those reputations were not quite as bad as they were initially thought. You sort of get like one guy has rags on something, and then that sort of gets passed around. For example, one example was the light machine gun used by the French during World War One.
Yep. Called
the Shosha or Shosho. And it was a very it was kind of like equivalent to the Sten. It was like they needed a gun, they needed it now, and they made this very sort of cheap and nasty sort of thing. And light machine guns were pretty sort of cutting edge technology for the time. And the problem where it got the bad reputation is when the Americans joined the war, they were given these rifles to train on. The problem was they wanted it in their ammunition type, so they had to be rechambered and reset up for the 30-06 that the Americans used. Mm. The problem was the conversion done was very, very, very bad, and these guns would not even go through like a single magazine without jamming, and they only hold like 20 rounds. And of course, they didn't have as many of them as say the French did. So they were using them only for training purposes. So you had like all these troops going through training and coming out of it with a bad opinion of this gun.
But personal weapons are such a subjective area. I mean, I remember when I was in the Green Machine, had the opportunity to use the Armour, and we'd heard. And this is when I was in during the 80s, and we'd heard, such a bad reputation about the Armour from Vietnam War, but I absolutely loved it. I thought it was a great rifle to sort of carry around and use, nice and light and reasonably easy to clean. It certainly never jammed when I was using it, and it was great. And it just goes to show how subjective these sort of things can be. Yeah, well, I mean,
one of the sort of aspects that often Ian over at Forgotten Weapons touches on is that there's a big difference between weapons that are good for military purposes and weapons that are quite good but not suited for military purposes, and that sort of breaks down to like how easy it is to disassemble, clean, keep it running, keep mud and dirt out of it. A lot of the guns that sort of earned bad reputations were probably more suited to police work you know, and some guns, I think it was the Rising submachine gun that was used by the American Marines during World War II. That earned a bit of a bad reputation, but after the war, it was used by the police and did its job very, very well.
A lot of it too, I guess, goes also to training and how you bring the training regime into it. I mean, we got to think that, you know, when we're talking about weapons from World War II, we're talking about, you know, citizen soldiers, you know, kids who'd only done about 3 months training before they sort of went off to war or anything like that. So the training they got back then compared to like the training that our troops get now is just miles apart.
Yeah. I mean, you know, even though the technology which was much more crude back then as far as like weapons, rifle manufacturing, all that sort of stuff goes, it really comes down to the creativity of the designers who make these weapons and how well they can engineer it to come apart very easily and into only say a few pieces. Classic example is like the MP40 submachine gun. It actually had its recoil spring was sort of enclosed, and so when you disassembled it, you had like this telescopic type of deal with the spring enclosed inside it, so you never had to worry about mud getting into that thing. It was very well designed in that regard, but you know, a lot more expensive compared to a lot of the other submachine guns of the Allies and and the Russians.
Absolutely.
Yeah, true.
There's a trade-off on all sides, and sometimes, you know, reliability is one of them. Unfortunately, if you need to get guns and get them quickly, the British invented the Sten because they needed a submachine gun and they couldn't afford to keep buying Thompsons. Thompsons are very expensive.
Absolutely, yeah. All right, well, I think we'll wrap that up there, and we'll go into our new segment now, which is listener mail, and we've got two listener mails, or two people who've sent us in some emails, so we'll have a look at what they've got to say. That's coming up next. And we're back with listener mail. And the first one we got is from Rud van der Salem. And excuse me, Rud, if I've just butchered your name. Ian is part Dutch, so he assures me that at least I got the first part right.
I hope.
And Rud writes into us, he enjoyed the podcast about Operation Unthinkable, but he's got a few thoughts on that. He says that the Russian divisions, regiments and armies weren't the equivalent to either the Allied or Axis counterparts. So as far as he recalls, if they're a bit of a step down in unit size. He also says that the Russians were not so much into blitzkrieg. They were more a mass sort of steamroll, and they were able to do some tactical manoeuvring, but usually kept it fairly simple. They would encircle enemy units, but usually only when enemy units were stuck in place, often by their orders, which generally came from Hitler, of course. Thou shalt not retreat. The Allies, Rud says, would not likely have used their strategic air forces for strategic purposes, and I think that amongst all three of us here, we agree with that.
Yep.
Faced with such a large army, the Allied strategic air force would have been used to tear up any large concentration of supplies or units behind the Russian front lines. And, of course, the Russians never faced anything like what the Allies could do with not only strategic air forces, but certainly tactical air forces. Because certainly from the Russian point of view into 43, 44, 45, the Luftwaffe was very much a diminished force. All sides were dealing with fairly depleted manpower pools by 1945. Certainly, I think from the Russian point of view and the British point of view, I'm not so sure about the American point of view because they still weren't geared for total war even in 45. So I think that they could have still squeezed another couple of million troops out of their population if they were required to. But having said that, Rud then says that the Russian steamroller tactics would have bled the Allies dry sooner rather than later, and I think I tend to agree with that also. Add to that the lines of communication and supplies and the amount of interdiction that the Soviets would have been dealing with. Ruth says that the Allied tanks were equal to the Soviets, but they did not have many of them. The Comet and Pershing were very good, if not better, but fewer in number. I tend to agree with you in the Pershing. I'm not so sure about the Comet tanks coming up against the Russians, but that's just my opinion. That said, the Sherman faced Soviet tanks in the 50s and 60s and still did fine. Yeah, that's true, but certainly by the 50s and 60s, the Shermans have been quite heavily modified, had they not, Julian?
Yeah, you can't really compare sort of post-war Shermans to Shermans during the war. During the war, they had a lot of the welded hulls, whereas like Egyptian Shermans after the war were cast hulls.
Yeah, and the Israeli ones, obviously.
Israeli ones.
They outgunned their shins.
Plus, you got to look at the tactics used too by the Arab nations.
Yeah.
Especially in the 6-day war, that was absolutely atrocious. They were our own worst enemy.
Yeah, that's true. In fact, that might make a good subject for one of our episodes on the Arab-Israeli wars.
Yeah.
We'll keep that in mind. Rudd goes on to say that Allied tanks were equal to Soviets. Also, the Western Allies did use swarm tactics to knock out the German tanks, but when the shoe's on the other foot, the Western Allies, and he quotes a couple of instances where some US Army units in Normandy and Alsace-Lorraine, the Battle of the Bulge, were very capable of bloodying German armour badly. Having advantage of knowing terrain and picking a time and place of engagement are huge advantages for armour clashes, which I'd have to agree with.
Exactly, yep.
Rid finishes up by saying, that said, I think the Soviets would have had enough power to push the Western Allies back to the Rhine, but the closer they got to England and the strategic bomber bases, he closes with the word, ouch.
Yep. No, totally agree with you there, Rud.
Absolutely. Our next listener mail comes from Marty, and Marty would like us to have a chat about building models for competitions. So I think in our next episode, which is actually coming out next week, we're late with this particular episode because I got the dreaded man flu. So there's been a bit of delay pushing this episode out. So we're going to compensate by having another episode next week. And I think we'll take that up. We'll actually have a look at building for competitions rather than just building for pleasure. What do you guys think?
No, it sounds like a plan, mate.
Yeah, why not?
Yep.
All right, no worries.
Done enough competitions, yep.
Okay, I think that just about wraps up what we've got. Again, if you'd like to comment or give us some hints or want to hear us actually talk about something, drop us a line to onthebench64@gmail.com or pop along and visit us on our Facebook page. And a big shout out to all of you guys who have been downloading so far. We've got a huge audience over in the US. Sweden, in fact, we've got about 8 people over in Sweden who are listening.
Oh, fantastic.
Which is great.
Hello to our Swedish friends.
The UK, we need to work on Britain. It's very low numbers over there, so we've got to build that up.
We'll get to them.
And the other half of our audience, of course, is mainly made up from Australia, so that's fantastic. Guys, thanks very much for being with us. Ian?
No worries, Dave.
Julian?
Yep.
And we'll see you next week.
Bye.